Welcome to the Expat Edge with Marcus and Matt, where we answer your questions about becoming an expat to help you thrive abroad.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Expat Edge. We're back again with Tim from Zeroqode, and we're going to talk a little bit about how Tim got his start working abroad, how he got his first job, and how he then networked and got subsequent jobs outside the US. Tim, I know in the previous video we talked about how you decided to go abroad, but how did you get that first job? I know it was through a mutual friend of ours, but how did you end up coming to that?
Sure. So it's actually kind of a funny story. So as you said, it's through a mutual friend. I was in an airport in Amsterdam, and I was scrolling through Facebook waiting for a flight to go to Paris at the time. And I saw our friend had posted that they were looking for a native English speaker for a sales role at his company in Moscow. And at the time, I was kind of exploring opportunities to move to Moscow, but it was difficult because I have student loans that I had to pay off, and so kind of a standard English teacher job that pays 30,000 rubles a month wasn't going to be enough for me to pay my student loans, pay rent, and still have food and whatnot. And so anyway, I contacted him about the opportunity. He set me up with an interview with their head of sales. We had a great chat. One of the most important things when you're doing interviews and you're still in the United States is to be flexible with your timing, right? Because of the time difference. So I had an interview with them at about, I think it was 4:30 in the morning, my time.
I think flexibility goes
chat.
Only so far, right? I would have told him no way, but that's a good.
Well, I'll tell
point.
more about my schedule at my current job, but yeah. So we had a fantastic chat, and honestly, it was the easiest hiring process I ever experienced. Right after the interview, I got a message from our friend, and he just said, "Dude, you killed it. How much money do you want?" And then that was it. That was the entire interview. That was the entire process. So anyway, about a week later, I ended up signing some papers, and about 2 months after that, I picked up and I moved to Moscow.
Nice. And was it difficult with the work visas, or did you just kind of show up and then figure out the work visas later, or?
Yeah, that was more of it. Is that I showed up to Moscow, and then we kind of figured it all out once I got there. I mean, I was very thankful that they paid for my ticket there. They were very helpful with relocation. So yeah, it was I got very lucky. I'm very grateful for them helping me to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I mean, as I hope our viewers can see, it's very important kind of who you know, especially when you're looking for jobs abroad. Then after you worked at that company, Tim, then you went and you got another job at Zeroqode, right? And how did that process work for you? How did you go about trying to find that job?
Sure. So I was looking for a new opportunity, and I was exploring on Headhunter, which is I mentioned it in our last conversation. And so I came across this company, Zeroqode. I thought what they were doing was really cool. I did some research on them after I found the post. Thought it was super simple, and so I threw in my application in there. Sometimes like you do, you just throw it in there and you don't really think about it. So I threw it in there. I did some research. I connected with the founders on LinkedIn. And a couple of weeks later, I got a WhatsApp message, also at about 1 or 2 in the morning, because the founder's in Bali, asking me if I was interested in interviewing for the position. And so I connected with him. We had a great conversation over WhatsApp. I had a first interview with him, and then 2 more interviews with his other co-founder at the time. And so, yeah, that was a much longer interview process. They asked a lot of questions. We went into a lot of deeper detail. But it was about, communication. And I think that anyone who, has sort of a sales or a business development background or knows how to develop those skills is really going to have an edge up on the competition.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing I always tell people. When people come to me and they say, Matt, how do I find a job abroad? I always just say, look, if you're a sociable person, the easiest job you're going to find is in sales and business development. And it's not what, I don't know about you, but I've had this conversation with Evan a number of times, who's the mutual connection that helped you get your first job. A lot of people have this kind of like sleazy idea of sales, that you're like trying to sell stuff that nobody needs. But it really isn't about that. It's really about making a connection and trying to help people solve problems. If you can't solve the problem, you let it go, you go on to the next. But those types of skills, I think, in certain areas of the world are also lacking, right? I think that's a competitive advantage we have as Americans in certain parts of the world. I mean, what would you say are like the biggest challenges in, trying to find a job? I know every time I have these kinds of conversations, it obviously sounds a lot like luck, probably to people who are listening, right. But I still think that there are ways, that you were trying to put yourself forward in the best way possible and looking in the right places, when you found the job.
Right. So a lot of it is about, it's about hitting the pavement, really, right? So like you can go out there and you can put out 500 applications, and yeah, that's great, but the conversion rate on those is going to be super low. It's just like with leads, right? If you're going after and sending messages to everyone on LinkedIn to try to buy your product or whatever, you're not going to have a great conversion rate, and even less so right. with jobs, because you need to build even more of a trust, because they're paying you ostensibly for a much longer term than they would be purchasing a product for in right. a lot of cases. So a lot of it is about, putting your best foot forward, and then also, showing what makes you different. I remember, and this was back when I was in the US, I was trying to get a job at this one company, and they had rejected me initially, right? And the initial way I got my foot in the door was I found the founder's email address. I sent them an email directly and said, hey, I don't really fit your profile, but let's have a conversation and see if this fits, right? Eventually they ended up rejecting me, and I sent them another email and I said, no, I don't like this rejection. Let's have another conversation and figure out how we can get over this. Long story short, they offered me a job and I didn't end up taking it, but it's about being persistent, right? And showing that you're able to fit with the role, and that you're someone who is really passionate about what that company is doing. Yeah,
well, I think that's one thing, that a lot of people don't think about. When I was in college, they teach you to kind of do that, right? Like you need to say why you're the best fit for the job. But I always find that young people, they're like trying to make up ways why the job will work for them, instead of right. why don't you go and try to find the companies that are actually doing something that you think is interesting? Then you don't have to make it up, and then it comes off as more sincere. And that's what I did in when I was abroad, was I tried to find a company that was doing something that I thought was interesting, and then saying, hey, I think I've got the skills. But a lot of people also don't realize, and I'm sure you know this, right? But most people hire not for skills, but for personality. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And so
it's so much about personality and how you present yourself, and to make sure that you're a fit with the company.
Right. Everybody, you can learn just about any job within a couple months, but if you're going to really do well, you have to be able to get along with the people you're working with. But
definitely.
Anyway, what the last question I got for you, Tim, is: do you think your language skills were a big deal in landing some of these jobs?
I think it definitely helped, right? I remember when I first moved to Moscow, my Russian wasn't great. It was okay. I knew it academically much better than I knew it socially, right? And I remember my second day at Admitted, I was in like an all company meeting, and after about 10 minutes, I was so exhausted from listening to so much Russian, and I was just beat and just could not process anymore. I was done. Right. I was like, wow, I have so much further to go. And now I'm leading meetings with business development teams and with developers who don't speak any English completely in Russian. So I think working in the environment and being thrown into it helps you so much with it, with the language side, I mean. And then also, if you're an American who has a decent understanding of Russian, or even a basic understanding of Russian, that's going to help you understand so much the culture in this part of the world. It's going to help you, form better connections with your colleagues, and it's going to help you, improve your language if you already have that base in place.
Exactly. So Tim, thank you very much for joining us again. I think your insights are super helpful. I think a lot of our audience will find value in it. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you've got questions for Tim, we'll put his email in the description box below, and we'll see you in another episode. This was the Expat Edge with Matt and Marcus. We hope you enjoyed the video. Visit theexpatedge.com for even more content that will help you thrive abroad. You can submit your ideas for video topics and sign up for free at theexpatedge.com. See you there.